Before we begin today's story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy emotionally driven stories that stay with you long after the video ends. These stories aren't loud or rushed. They quietly settle into your heart. The hallway light blinked once, then stayed dim. Clara Whitman stepped out of her apartment with a small trash bag in one hand and her phone in the other, already planning what she would make for dinner. She paused. A soft crash echoed near the stairwell. A box had tipped over. A book slid across the carpet. A man crouched in the middle of the mess, rubbing the back of his neck as if embarrassed by the noise he had made. Two more boxes leaned against the wall, and a tall floor lamp wobbled dangerously beside them. Dot, you are Heart. Clara hesitated. New people moved into the building all the time. Usually she kept to herself. She had learned that habit slowly, through years of disappointments and conversations that faded too fast. But something about the way he stared at the scattered books, like he was already tired before he had even unpacked, made her step forward. "Looks like that one didn't survive the trip," she said. He jumped slightly and looked up. His hair was dark and messy, like he had run his hand through it too many times. His expression was polite but unsure. "Yeah," he replied. "Guessed gravity won this round." She smiled and knelt beside him. "Here, you don't have to. It's fine." They gathered the books quickly. Some were thick with worn spines. Others were thin and folded from use. Titles about city design, old novels, notebooks filled with sketches. "You read a lot," Clara said. "More than I should," he answered. Another book slipped from his stack, knocking a frame onto the floor. The glass. Two people stood in front of an ocean, smiling into the sun. The man froze. He picked it up immediately, his thumb covering part of the image. Clara noticed the tight movement, the way his shoulders stiffened. She pretended not to stare. "I'm Clara," she said gently, handing him another book. "Ethan," their fingers brushed. Quick, accidental. Still, they both pulled back at the same time. A short pause followed, small but heavy. He cleared his throat. "Thanks for helping." "No problem." She stood and brushed dust from her jeans. "So, across the hall?" she asked, nodding toward the door behind him. "Yeah, just moved in today." "Welcome to the building. The heater works when it feels like it, and the elevator complains after midnight." He let out a small laugh. "Good to know." She watched him restock the boxes, more carefully this time. "You need help with the rest?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "I think I've already taken enough of your time." There was something guarded in his tone. Not rude, just practiced. "Well," she said, lifting her trash bag again. "I'm sure we'll run into each other." "Probably," he replied. She walked down the hallway, but she could feel his eyes on her back, for just a second longer than necessary. Inside her apartment, she dropped the trash by the door and leaned against it, confused by the sudden quiet. She didn't usually talk to strangers. She definitely didn't keep thinking about them afterward. Yet here she was, standing in her kitchen, replaying the way his voice softened when he said, "Thank you." Across the narrow courtyard, a light flicked on in the apartment opposite hers, his apartment. She told herself it was nothing, just curiosity, just someone new. Still, she stayed at the window longer than she meant to, watching the faint shadow of movement behind his curtains. Neither of them knew it yet, but that small moment in a dim hallway had already shifted something, and neither Clara nor Ethan could pretend they hadn't noticed. The next time it happened, it was the elevator. Clara felt it before she heard it, a soft lurch. The lights dimmed for half a second. Ethan stood beside her, holding a paper bag of groceries. "Did it just stop?" he asked. She kept her voice calm. "Give it a moment, it likes to scare people." As if on cue, the elevator jerked gently and continued upward. He exhaled. "Good. I'm not ready to live here and already have a story like that." She smiled. "You'll get plenty." They rode in silence for half a floor. Not awkward, just aware. The doors opened. He stepped out first, then paused. "Coffee?" She blinked. "What?" "There's a place on the corner. I was going to. You can say no." She should have said no. She didn't. Okay, that was how it started. Coffee once turned into Doyce. Twice turned into hallway conversations that lasted a little too long, then into walking home at the same time without planning it. They learned small things about each other quickly. He liked his coffee black. She added too much sugar. He worked late. She woke early. He read before sleeping. She played soft music in the mornings. The building felt smaller somehow. Less echo, less lonely. One afternoon, the laundry room flooded when a washer gave up mid-cycle. Water spilled across the tile. Residents gathered in irritated clusters. Clara arrived with her jeans rolled up. Ethan stood barefoot on a chair, reaching for the shut-off valve. "This is not how I imagine my evening," he said. "At least you're helping," she replied. They mopped together using old towels someone had donated. When it was done, both of them were damp, tired, and laughing for no real reason. He looked at her like he wanted to say something. He didn't. Later that night, her phone buzzed. "Ethan, this is random, but does the internet go out a lot here?" She smiled. "Clara, only during storms." "Why?" "Ethan, mine's dead and I've got a deadline." She stared at the screen for 2 seconds, then typed, "Clara, you can come over." He arrived 10 minutes later with his laptop under one arm and Rain clinging to his jacket. "Sorry," he said. "No problem." They sat on opposite ends of her couch, typing in quiet. Rain tapped against the window, his foot bounced slightly. She noticed. "Stressful project?" she asked. Something like that. He didn't explain, she didn't push. After an hour, he closed his laptop and let out a long breath. "You saved me." She shrugged. "That's what neighbors do." He smiled, but it faded quickly. "Most don't," he said. Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. When he left, he paused at her door. "Thanks again." "You're welcome." He stepped into the hallway, then turned back. "Clara?" "Yeah?" He hesitated, shook his head. "Never mind. Good night." She stood there longer than she meant to. 2 hours later, her phone lit up again. "Ethan, I didn't mean to make it weird earlier." "Clara, you didn't." 3 dots appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. "Ethan, can I ask you something?" Her thumb hovered. "Clara, sure." A moment passed. "Ethan, would it be okay if I asked for help again sometime?" She read it twice. Not coffee, not hanging out, help. She thought about the way he had stood barefoot on that chair in the flooded laundry room. The way his voice changed when he said most people didn't offer things. She typed, "Clara, of course." The reply came almost instantly. "Ethan, thanks." "Really?" She set her phone down, leaning back against the couch. Across the hall, Ethan stared at his screen longer than necessary. He hadn't planned to send that message. It had slipped out, honest and simple. He told himself it didn't mean anything, just that it felt easier to ask her than anyone else. That was all. But his chest didn't quite agree. The next morning, they ran into each other by the mailboxes. Clara had her hair pulled back, still half awake, flipping through envelopes she barely cared about. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept much. "Morning," she said. "Hey." A pause. Not awkward, just heavier than usual. "You work late?" she asked. "Yeah." He didn't elaborate. She didn't ask him to. But something about the way his eyes lingered on the floor told her the answer was longer than one word. That evening, Clara heard a knock on her door. Not loud, just careful. She opened it to find Ethan standing there with a small toolbox. "I don't actually need help," he said, "but I figured if I was going to ask eventually, I should start with something simple." She raised an eyebrow. "What's broken?" "Nothing yet," she laughed despite herself. "Gwen." His apartment still smelled faintly of fresh paint and cardboard. Boxes were mostly unpacked now. Books lined the shelves. The floor lamp stood upright this time. But one thing was missing, the photo frame. Clara noticed immediately. "You're settling in," she said, trying to. He opened the toolbox and pretended to tighten a loose cabinet handle that wasn't actually loose. "You didn't have to invent a reason," she said gently. He stopped. "I know." Silence stretched between them. Then he surprised himself. "There was someone," he said quietly. Clara didn't move. In the photo, she nodded once. "I figured." He sat down on the edge of the couch. "We were supposed to move here together." The words felt heavy in the room. "What happened?" she asked softly. He let out a slow breath. She changed her mind. There was more behind it. Clara could hear it, but she didn't push. He rubbed his hands together. "I guess I didn't." A small, sad smile touched his face. "I kept the picture longer than I should have." "Where is it now?" Clara asked. "In a drawer." He didn't look at her when he said it. She understood that kind of drawer. The one you close but never really forget about. Days passed. They didn't talk about it again. But something had shifted. The guarded tone in his voice softened around her. And Clara found herself staying longer in doorways, lingering in conversations, noticing the small details she usually ignored, like how he always stepped slightly aside to let her walk first, or how he remembered she hated overly bright lights and dimmed his lamp without being asked. One night, the power went out across the building. Complete darkness. A collective groan echoed through the hall. Clara lit a candle in her kitchen. 3 minutes later, there was another careful knock at her door. She didn't even ask who it was. "Come in," she called. Ethan stepped inside, holding his phone flashlight. "Your apartment feels less apocalyptic than mine," he said. She handed him a candle. They sat on the floor, backs against her couch, the room flickering gold around them. "You ever think about how strange it is," he said quietly, "that you can live next to someone for years and never know them? But sometimes one small moment changes that?" She looked at him. "I try not to think about it," she admitted. "Why?" "Because small moments can turn into big ones, and that's bad." She hesitated. "Sometimes." The candle flame shifted between them for the first time. Neither of them looked away. There it was again, that quiet feeling. Small, curious, dangerous. The kind that comes before change. And this time, neither of them pretended not to notice.